Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Olivier Menel, and I am the Events Officer at Connectia and TechSoup New Zealand. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar, Moving to the Cloud versus Local Infrastructure, which will be presented by Matt Walton, who is Senior IT Consultant at Infoxchange. Before we start, just a quick reminder that this session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to you all shortly. You will then be able to access the recording and the slides at any time on our website. If you have any question, please type it in a question box on your webinar panel, and we'll go through them during the session. We have quite a fairly large number of attendees today, so we may not have time to go through them all, but if that's the case, Matt will answer them offline after the webinar. If you have any technical issue, please also type it in a question box. I will try my best to sort that out for you. And that's all from me. Matt, it's all yours.
Thank you, Ollie, and welcome everyone to today's webinar on moving to the cloud versus local infrastructure. So really today is going to highlight the pros and cons of each solution and start to help you understand what might be suitable for your organization. So Infoxchange, just a bit of background, is a not-for-profit organization, and we only work with not-for-profits, and we work with all types of not-for-profits. So from volunteer-run small organizations to large nationwide organizations with thousands of staff. So I think it's fair to say that there is no one solution that suits everybody, and we also implement both cloud and local server infrastructure. So while we're a little bit biased, we're giving a view that highlights that there is often scenarios where both types of infrastructure can work well. So today is really about giving you the information to help you understand what's right for your organization. So my role really has been with a lot of these organizations trying to understand their needs, work out what's important, what level of risk they're comfortable with, and how much they're willing to spend, and then coming up with a solution that works for where they're headed as an organization. So hopefully I'll try and impart a little bit of that today in the first hour. It is a broad topic, so hopefully I'll cover everything just to give you a taste. But as Ollie said, I'm happy to pause about halfway where we can talk through any questions, as well as leave time at the end for some more questions. And my email address is on the slides as well, so happy for you to contact me directly if there is anything that I've missed or that you'd like to drill down into a little bit further. So the key things that we're going to cover today, the first one is really just helping you understand what you need from a technology perspective, because that's always the most important place to start, is working out what you need and what are your requirements before you get dazzled by any of these potential technologies. A lot of people go off and Google and try and find out what systems suit them before they really understand what they need. So we'll start there. Then talk about what other people are doing. So what are the current trends, and look at what cloud-based systems are out there currently. We'll also look at what local infrastructure means and where that might be suitable. And then we'll talk about considerations for PCs and mobile devices. Obviously, mobility is becoming a popular trend where everyone wants to access their information on their smartphones. So that's a strong consideration as well. And then look at what you need to think about from an internet or network connection perspective for your organization. So they're the key topics that we're going to cover today. And all of those topics we're trying to keep, I'm trying not to go in too much technical depth and trying not to use any technical mumbo jumbo for those who potentially are not necessarily IT people. So these sessions are designed for whether it's finance managers or CEOs or operations staff that often in the not-for-profit sector get left with the role of IT decision making. And to be honest, that's where I came from. I was traditionally, I was a communications manager and a project manager and ran a community centre. So I ended up getting lumped with the IT portfolio of my organisation and have just continued to work in IT since then. So it's a very common scenario. So we're trying to keep it not too technical today. So when you think about what you need as an organisation, so as a not-for-profit, a typical not-for-profit, these are some examples of things that you need to think about. So, look, I won't list everyone, but most of them will be familiar to you. So, just things like a finance system is pretty self-explanatory. Some larger organisations also need donation management, HR systems, payroll systems, time and attendance systems, though risk management systems. So it's looking at what systems do you need, and when perhaps in some cases an Excel spreadsheet is fine, but for larger organisations you actually need a more comprehensive system for some of those functions. And then just basic things that all of you would have around where you store your documents, whether that's a file server or a cloud product like Dropbox or Office 365, and then obviously email, calendars and contacts. Then there's obviously the devices that you need and use to access all your information. And another category of information that people need to think about is their client information. So obviously there's some privacy rules around storing client information, and there's different types of systems. So whether it's a CRM, which is customer relationship management to track your leads and inquiries, or a client management system, particularly for those in the social services or disability space where you need case notes and sort of more detail about each client. Then there's the whole external public-facing information for your organisation. So obviously your website, but also things like member portal. Do you want people to be able to log in and access information? And then most, particularly larger organisations, are always looking at things like intranets and internal collaboration tools, you know, discussion boards and those sort of things where staff can communicate and collaborate. And then there's the real need for that risk management, so things like firewalls and backup and disaster recovery. So these are all the things that, particularly for you non-technical people, can really confuse sort of not-for-profit organisations and really have a whole suite of requirements from a technology perspective, and each one of these can cost money, require ongoing management and support, and also staff training in many cases. So the key is around prioritisation and looking at what you really need. It's easy to go off and buy lots of disparate systems, but I think part of the priority for technology is to try and keep it simple where possible. So what we're seeing with a lot of not-for-profits is that a lot of people are trying to keep it simple by moving to cloud-based applications. So obviously cloud-based applications means that someone else is hosting it, and that could be any type of system. So it could be your client management system, or it could be storing your email in Gmail, or it could be storing your documents in Dropbox, or it could be having MyOb online or those type of systems as well. So most systems nowadays come also in cloud-based. So what that means, it means you're actually decreasing your reliance on local infrastructure. So it means that you used to have an email server and a file server and an application server potentially in a rack in your office or in a data center. But nowadays, what we're seeing is people are moving their emails to things like Office 365. and moving to cloud-based applications. So you're gradually decreasing your reliance on those local servers, and in many cases, able to get rid of the servers altogether. And we'll come back to this discussion about whether you can or can't get rid of your local server entirely. The other thing that we're seeing is there's a really increase in use of mobile devices. So whether that's smartphones or iPads or Surface Pros or laptops, that people are wanting to, whether it's work from home or work from client sites or just be geographically dispersed where you're not all necessarily in one office. So this is where people are wanting instant access to all their systems and information, and in the old model that was very difficult. So that's where a lot of organisations are having that challenge, where they're trying to get access to all their information in a new way, but using old infrastructure. So that can be a challenge. And obviously, the more you try and use cloud-based applications or remote access, the more you're reliant on cloud-based internet. So really looking at what we're seeing is a lot of organisations are still using ADSL or poor quality connections, and they're finding that a real challenge to try and access all these cloud-based applications using their old ADSL connections that they got away with when they had a server in their office. So that's another challenge that we're seeing in the sector, and sometimes it's expensive, or in regional areas it can actually be very difficult to get the connections you need. So these are things that we're seeing. So in terms of the stats, so we do an annual survey with Connecting Up where we collect information about whether people are moving to the cloud or what they're doing, and these are some of the stats that help explain where people are at, as well as some of the barriers and why people aren't moving to the cloud. So particularly those stats down the bottom there, those stats are why people aren't moving to the cloud. So in some cases, there are still some people with data security concerns. Now, whether those concerns are correct or valid is still a different discussion, but there is still a perception that the cloud isn't secure. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that's the perception out there that we find in the survey with 29%. The other factor is the cost of moving. So 30% actually are saying, well, yeah, we know there's these great cloud-based applications, but we're using an old free database that doesn't cost us anything, and this new cloud application costs us $50 a month or whatever it might be. And we're actually saying, no, that is a barrier to them. So that's something that people have to manage and prioritize and build that business case, which we'll talk about in a minute. As I said, sometimes the internet is too expensive or insufficient, and in other cases, it's just 17% there. It's just no time or no knowledge or sort of no motivation really to move to the cloud. So what we're seeing there, as you can see, across all those sizes of organisations, whether you're very small to very large, what we're seeing is it's actually reasonably consistent. And what that means is the size of your organisation shouldn't be a barrier, or isn't a perceived barrier, to moving to the cloud, because cloud can actually be suitable for organisations of all size. So what it's saying is those very large organisations with IT teams and expertise do actually plan on moving in the next 3 years, whereas we're seeing the very small and small to medium ones often don't know as well. So there's a 29% where they're not sure because they don't necessarily have the expertise in that area, so they're not really across whether they should or could move. So what we're seeing, these are the common platforms that people are already using. So just moving across as some examples. So you've got 23% using Windows 7, 8 or 10, whereas on laptops you've got 21% using desktops. And you've got 17% there using smartphones, as well as 12% using tablets and iPads. So there's still a good cross-section of all the different devices, and we're seeing that regularly where they are all essentially, it's fit for purpose. So in many cases, a laptop is still perfectly fine, and a desktop for those office-based staff. So it just more gives a sense of there is still a need for all of those types of devices. And the file sharing applications, so there's still 50% using Windows-based. So that's mostly referring to sort of file servers. But more and more, we're seeing 39% there move to Dropbox, 20% use SharePoint or OneDrive on Office 365, 17% using Google Apps or Google Drive. So there's a growing percentage of people using those online instead of server-based. And the email application, so we've still got 32% using email servers, whereas 19% have actually moved to Exchange Online as part of Office 365, 15% on Google, and 20% on things like BigPond and those sort of internet service provider platforms. So you can see there's still a lot of people on server-based products, which is it'd be interesting to see what we see next year, because we are actually seeing a lot of people moving across to cloud-based applications now. So when I say cloud, what do we mean? So really what the cloud is, now I know this may be basic for some people, but there is still some confusion out there about what the cloud is and some fear around people who don't understand it. So really all it is, it's an IT service delivered over the internet. And to be honest, it's nothing new. Delivering IT services over the internet has been around. I know Infoxchange has been doing it for about 20 years now. So it's not a new product, but it's just becoming more and more common and more available. And in most cases, a lot of the applications that people are wanting are now cloud-based. So what describes the cloud? So really, one of the reasons why people move to the cloud, it's about reliability. So gone are the days, in many cases, where you would have to rely on one single server sitting in your office, providing all of your organization's functions and applications and information. And then if that server went down, your business basically shut for the day. I remember this back in other organizations I've worked for, where if the server went down or the internet went down, then you all went to the pub or you went home for the day. So, and while that was in some cases a good thing, from an organization point of view, you actually want to make sure your platform is reliable. So what the cloud does, it lets organizations like Microsoft or Google look after all of that for you. So instead of relying on one server, they've got rows and rows and rows of servers and multiple data centers in multiple locations providing that infrastructure for you. So it's very unlikely that those platforms go down anywhere near as regularly as a single server. Expandability is a really important one. Particularly, we're seeing lots of organisations change and merge. And I know things like the NDIS in the disability sector is seeing a lot of organisations either folding up or merging. And we had one recently where there was an organisation with 200 staff on Office 365 for their emails, merged with another organisation that on a file server. And it was really easy to just basically add another 200 accounts to that organization's Office 365 platform. It's, a few clicks of the buttons and add 200 licenses. But if that was on a server, we would have had to go on and bought a new server, bought new software, bought an extra 200 licenses, and done a more costly and time-consuming and impacting users project to do that expansion. Whereas because of the usage-based pricing and expandability, we could just basically add however many users we want. And likewise, because it's usage-based, if something happened and we needed to drop back to 10 users instead of 400, you can do that really easily as well. And the other change is you don't need capital investment. So if we were to go out and buy several new servers, you're up for $10, $20, $50,000 plus installation. Whereas in this case, Microsoft look after all of that for you. It's just a per user per month cost. The other really beneficial thing that most people are attracted to about the cloud is that it's accessible over the internet, which means people can work from anywhere. So if you're out of the client site supporting someone with a disability, or if you're trying to work from home, all you need is an internet connection to be able to log on to your emails or log on to your client management system or access your shared documents. Whereas in the old scenario, if you want to try and log into your server remotely, you'd need VPNs, you'd need connectivity, you'd need security settings. You know, there was a lot more effort and infrastructure involved to actually get remote access to those platforms. And a lot of the time it just wasn't possible. So you can see some of the ones that some of the cloud applications that you've probably heard of. Look, there are too many to mention, and each sector has their own, but most of you would have already heard about Office 365 and Gmail that do a lot of different platforms, so email, documents, video conferencing, collaboration, those sort of things. Whereas you have platforms like Azure and Amazon, which are more infrastructure as a service, which means you can put a server on there and you can do whatever you want on there, host your applications. Whereas there are also another whole wide range of applications that provide a specific purpose. So like MyOb, instead of installing MyOb on your server or your desktop, you just get the MyOb online. Now, and that's applicable to a lot of different applications, whether they be finance or CRMs or client management systems. So the things to think about when moving to the cloud, and really these are the things that help you justify moving to the cloud and give you the reason to move to the cloud. I know in not-for-profit change isn't always easy or welcome, and spending money on IT isn't always welcome either, and it's not something that boards or CEOs would like to do lightly. So what we tend to do is look at these reasons, and if you agree with any of these, then that could be the reason for you to move. So the most common one at the top there is we have people coming to us saying, oh, look, my server's 3, 5, 10 years old, and I'm not sure whether I need to replace it. Can you help, should we move to the cloud or should we buy a new server? And when people see that they're up for a $20,000 server or whatever it may be, then they say, well, actually, we can move to the cloud for a lot cheaper than that, so let's head in that direction. So that's often a good excuse, but it also saves ongoing costs for support as well as managing sort of backups, paying for licenses and software, and doing updates on a regular basis. So there's some of the reasons why that you might be able to get rid of a server. The other thing that it's actually saving is being able to use things like video conferencing and working from home, teleworking, which what we're seeing is organisations, including Infoxchange, are saving thousands of dollars a month by actually not having to travel as much. So I have staff of mine based in Sydney, Auckland, Adelaide. I've got colleagues all over the country and New Zealand, and instead of me having to travel to work with clients over there or to work with my colleagues, I can use video conferencing and then document sharing on cloud-based applications that allow us to save a fortune in travel. So often that money you save in travel can pay for whatever investment you require in implementing these systems. The hardware failure, look, I used to be one of those IT guys that used to sort of worry at nights about my server going down and having to get the alerts if there was any issues. But basically now Microsoft look after, or Google, or whoever you're hosting with, look after all of that for you. So it's really just reducing the need to have someone look after that, as well as the worry of that reliability. Collaboration is really one of the keys around the business case, to say, particularly those who are across multiple locations or working mobile, then it allows you to work, you can have people, we've had 10 people working on the one across the country and in New Zealand, all working on the one document at the one time. Or whether it's a project site where you can have task lists and news and those sort of things. So it's really trying to improve the way that you work. The other thing that we see very regularly is that people who aren't using the cloud and are still relying on file servers often have issues with duplicate documents or information. So it could be that a client name and a phone number and an email address is stored in about 4 different locations, or it could be that you've got a policy that's stored in 6 different folders on your file server because no one could agree where it went. It might sit under policy, it might sit under risk, it might sit under Matt's folder, or it might sit under a department folder. So what we're seeing is the cloud can actually allow you to just store things in a single location and share them to multiple people. So just some general tips about the cloud before we move on to local infrastructure. Really, it's consider your security and what information you're willing to store and not. I think there are a lot of misconceptions around this and a lot of unnecessary fear. But each organisation needs to make their own decision about what they can and can't store overseas or with an Australian cloud provider. So if it says in your contract that you must store things in Australia, for example, there are lots of Australian providers around nowadays. So Microsoft Office 365 and Azure are now based in Sydney and Melbourne. So again, that counters some of that. There are lots of other providers out there as well. So that's just something, a due diligence that you need to go through. The other thing that we're seeing is you don't actually need to do wholesale changes in many scenarios. You can just move the bits that make sense to you, and in many scenarios, the things that are broken or the things that need fixing immediately. So we actually see that a lot of people are just moving emails first, for example. So they might maybe leaving their file server in their office because people are heavily reliant on that and don't want to move that to Dropbox or wherever. But the emails, your email server is about to die and you don't want to spend money on Exchange licenses and those sort of things. So you could just move your email, but leave your documents or your client management system until you're ready. So please consider staging. The other thing is, make sure you've got an architecture that allows your client information and documents to be in one spot. So we actually don't encourage you to move to the cloud to store some things in the cloud and then duplicate that on your file server. So really it's about picking one location that's the most suitable for that information and using that. So in many cases that's a cloud-based application, but if you're still relying on having that on your server, then just be wary of duplication. The other thing is make sure staff can work offline. So most of these cloud-based applications, they do have the ability to work offline. So my documents, for example, if the internet goes down or if I'm working on a plane or somewhere like that, then I can actually work on documents and they synchronize back up later when I log in. So you don't want people to be 100% reliant on the internet, particularly if you're in an office with a bad ADSL connection. So please just consider that. The other thing is, look at upgrading your internet and have a backup for if your internet does fail. So in many cases, we're seeing it is suitable to upgrade your internet, but as long as you've got a bit of a plan. And that plan could be as simple as we're all going to tether off our phones or work from home or go to the local library if the backup plan, if the internet fails, but as long as you have a plan. That is sort of in line with your risk policy of your organisation. The other thing is, consider a hybrid. Look, in many cases, particularly the sort of mid and large size organisations, most organisations need a combination of local and cloud infrastructure. So don't rule that out or feel that you have to do one or the other. All right. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is your local server infrastructure. So in what scenarios do you need local servers or infrastructure in your office? But I might just pause for a minute. We're about halfway through. Ollie, open to questions if anyone has them. I'll also save some time at the end.
Well, thank you, Matt. I think you can keep going because obviously you've been pretty clear. There are no questions at the moment.
Ah, that's good. Everyone knows everything. It's good. So let's keep going, and then we'll come back later. So really, what is local infrastructure? I think is so. Often people just assume that local infrastructure is just a server, but local infrastructure applies to all sorts of different devices and things that you often need in your office. Now, not everyone needs all of these, but just keep some of these in mind. So most of you will know what a modem is. Most of you would even have one at home, but when you start getting to a larger organization, you also need things like switches. So that's basically the thing in your rack where all the cables come out of that connect all your infrastructure to your desks where you plug your computer in. So there are different types of switches, and look, each one of these, there are hundreds of different types of switches and hundreds of different types of routers and modems. So I suppose this is just opening your eyes to make sure you're thinking about all of these things, or that you've got someone in your organization or a support provider who's making sure that each one of these is actually meeting your needs. And when you change environments, so if you're moving from a server to a cloud-based application or cloud-based server, you may still need a router, but it may be a different type of router. So this is where all of these things just require a bit of thought, and as long as you know the terms, you can now go to your support providers or your IT person and say, hey, is our router compatible if we move to a cloud-based server, and those sort of questions. Firewall, now again, not everyone needs a firewall. It really comes down to your level of risk, level of security, what data you're storing, and how much protection you need. So don't assume you need all of this. Obviously the servers, the big one. Now a server, again, there are lots of different types of servers and there are lots of things you can do with your servers. So some of it's hosting applications, whether it could be your email application, Exchange, or it could be your client management system that you're hosting, or an Access database, or a website, or a range of things. Most people are still using servers for document management and files, but most people also use it for user accounts and managing. So when you join an organization, usually you get a login to the network through the server. So that's something that we'll talk about in a minute around whether you still need that or not. And it helps manage your PCs, so doing updates and pushing out group policy or things that control all your PCs is what servers can do as well. Now, the other thing that some organisation needs, as well as, and sometimes instead of a server, is a NAS, which is network attached storage. So often they're just a big black box, like a beefed up USB drive that can store documents. Now, whether they're file shares or backups or images, or we often have organizations who store a lot of multimedia things that are almost too big to go in the cloud, things like videos and images. Some people just have a NAS. So they're a lot cheaper and easier to manage than a server. So that's something to keep in mind. A UPS, so if you have a server, you should probably have a UPS, which is an unlimited power supply, which basically is a backup battery and surge protection. If your power goes out, it manages how your server shuts down. So that's something that, again, if you have a server, you need one of these. Likewise, if you're doing backups and you've got a server and you use backup to tape still, then you probably need a tape drive. Or if most people are now moving to USB, where you get those terabyte USB drives where you back up data to and then you take off site. The other thing that we'll talk about later is cloud backups. So you can obviously back up to the cloud as well, instead of having to swap the tapes and drives. Patch panel connects all the cables, and PABX is often your phone system. So having that local infrastructure for phones is important as well. And again, if you're using VoIP phones, then it's a whole different requirement for if you're using an old style PBX system. So look, that isn't everything that you would possibly need, but just some common things that most organizations have from a local infrastructure. And as I said, you don't need all of them. So really the key comparisons between the two, just to really highlight the differences, is where in the cloud you've got ongoing monthly costs. So it could be, $5 a user a month for this service that you get online, whereas on a server, typically you would buy the server up front, then you would buy software, and then you would buy licenses as a once-off, and then you'd depreciate that over maybe 5 years. So you would have to go to the board and get a $20,000 approval to buy that platform or that system or that server. Whereas a lot of the time now, systems are, you don't need to go to the board to invest in a $20,000, thing that comes out of your bank account. Instead, it's just a $50 a month cost that's an operating expense. So again, there are pros and cons of both. We have some organizations who actually get grants and would prefer that initial upfront cost. We have others who don't want to have to get board approval every time, so they would prefer an operating expense. The next point is relying on internet or local network. So again, if you're relying on the internet and your internet goes down, there can be issues. Whereas if you're relying on a local network and something happens with the local network, obviously you're going to have issues as well. Whereas if you're just relying on the internet and the internet at your office goes down, then you could use your phone internet, your library internet, as I was saying before. So there are pros and cons of both. The cloud is obviously hosted externally in a data center in Sydney or wherever, whereas the servers are stored locally. In the cloud, there's automated updates. So if you have Office 365 in the cloud, you're just always on the latest version of emails, Exchange 2016 or whatever it is now. Whereas if you've got it on the server, you install it once, maybe Exchange 2010, and then every 3 years you need to upgrade it to 2013, 2016, 2019. So that's the difference. The cloud has combined software hardware, so it's usually just one price, whereas the server, you buy those separately. So you buy your software, you buy your hardware, and then you put your software on the hardware, obviously. If you're in the cloud, it's good to have local copies in case you go offline, whereas if you're on the server, it's good to have off-site backups in case something happens to your location. So either way, you need a bit of redundancy. So, as I think I started with, there are still reasons to keep a server. So I'm not here today to say everyone get rid of their servers. There's no need for them. In many cases, there is, and a lot of our clients still have some form of local infrastructure. So in some cases, if you want to use a system that you like, I know in disability there's a product called CareLink Plus, which is very popular, that is still server-based. So if you want to use CareLink Plus, you need a server, basically, is the bottom line. There are obviously other ones that are cloud-based, but if CareLink Plus meets your needs, then that's the reason that you need a server, and in many cases that's okay. So it's really, or a lot of people have sort of custom-built databases that they're not yet ready to get rid of. Often they can't be put on server-based environments or replicated. The other reason is storage of large files. As I said, people with marketing departments who do a lot of video editing and really big images, I wouldn't, if I've got a poor internet connection, I don't really want to be putting those images up and down the internet all day and trying to work off them stored online. So it's actually, in that case, it's more efficient to buy a NAS, a network attached storage, to store them locally while I'm working on them. And then, yeah, maybe publish them on YouTube when they're finished, but just for the working documents or large files locally. Obviously, the poor or expensive internet, as I said, we've got a lot of regional clients who get exorbitant pricing when they try and upgrade to fibre or any high-quality internet, so they're essentially stuck until the NBN sort of makes its way around and hope that will solve their problems. The other thing that a lot of people forget about servers is they're really good at managing PCs centrally. So typically, if you've got more than 20 PCs in one office, we often recommend that you should have a server or something that can push out those centralized updates, because the alternative is, if you don't have anything that manages them centrally, if you want to go and update to the latest Adobe Reader or whatever it is on all those PCs, you actually need to walk around to all those 20 PCs to do those updates. Now, usually, if you're paying a support provider or someone to do that, it's actually more cost efficient to have a server than it is to pay a support provider to update 20 PCs every 3 months. So that's a cost efficiency that is worth exploring. The other thing is Active Directory. So Active Directory is really where your single username and password is. So if you want the same username and password on your PC as you do when you log into your emails, as you do when you log into your applications, often the server is one of the best ways to do that. Whereas if you don't have a server and no infrastructure, you could have, your Gmail password is one thing, your application password's another thing, your Mail password's another thing, your desktop password's another thing. So that's something to consider and whether that's important to you. And if users want to move between PCs and actually see their desktop and their favorites and those sort of things between PCs, that's a roaming profile, then that's one of the functions your server performs. So again, these are in many cases good reasons to have a server. So some scenarios. So these are some common examples. Now, I'm not sure all of you will fit into these three categories, but it just gives you something to think about. So to be honest, if I was a small, and I'm on a board of a small organization, and I would never recommend that they have a server or any local infrastructure. So they're very lucky, actually, that they can get away with just using laptops and video conferencing and email, all hosted in the cloud, client management system in the cloud, finance in the cloud. They don't have to worry about any of that server infrastructure, and they don't have the capacity to deal with all of that. So for them, it makes a lot of sense to just go 100% cloud-based and not think about servers and backups. Whereas we have a couple of clients that are all in one office, 50 staff, all 9 to 5, all based in one office, and their server's fine. So in that case, we actually say, well, you know what, stay on your server, because those 50 staff, it's going to be easier and more familiar to them to just continue using your server in the short and medium term. We can manage the PC centrally. They can store their custom client management system on the server, local images, finance system locally. And in this case, we could actually do off-site backups to make sure they've got a bit of redundancy, and maybe email in the cloud because it just makes sense, and it's cheaper than hosting it locally. So in that case, they're mostly server with a bit of cloud where it really adds some value. Most large organizations, when you get over 200 staff, this scenario, we're saying, look, because they're multiple offices, they're a bit diverse, why don't you move most of your infrastructure to the cloud, but keep something at the central office. So the marketing department are in the central office, so let's just use, you know, that server there for your multimedia files. But let's back that server up to the cloud, and let's have most of our applications as cloud-based, so MyHub Online, those sort of things. So there's 3 examples. Now, obviously, often even larger organizations that have thousands and thousands of staff, they tend to have more owning local infrastructure in data centers. So there are, again, lots of different scenarios, but they were 3 that I thought might help you understand how hybrids can work. So another scenario that is topical, because Connecting Up and Microsoft announced recently that Microsoft Azure are offering $5,000 credits for not-for-profits. So there's a link at the bottom there to Connecting Up's recent information about how you can access this. Now, again, not suitable for everyone. And if you are thinking these sort of things, these are the questions you have to ask. Now, these questions are also relevant to other cloud-based servers like Amazon Web Services, AWS. Now, both of those, Azure hosted in Australia as well, just to let you know. So if you're about to say, hey, let's put our whole server up in the cloud as it is, these are the things you need to ask. So 1, you generally need quite good internet to be able to have a full server in the cloud. If you try to do it on an ADSL connection and 50 staff, you're not going to have a very good experience, and you're probably better off having a local server or no server at all. The other thing that a couple of people get caught on is they assume they can just move up and yep, let's put my server up in the cloud and everything will be fine. But they forget that their local router potentially is not compatible, so they need to spend a bit of money upgrading their router, and they also need VPNs. So again, they need to pay for VPNs to move up. So there's some other things to think about. The other thing that when you rent a server in Azure, essentially, is you do pay on an ongoing basis. Now, hopefully this can fit in your $5,000 credit for your storage. So every document or every backup or every email that you put up into there, you're paying for on an ongoing basis, on a monthly basis. So that helps you consider what you upload, basically. And the same, you actually pay for bandwidth. So anything that goes in or out of that server, you're actually paying a fee for. So often some of these monthly costs, where you can get an estimate of what it costs to host a month, people often forget the ongoing costs around storage and bandwidth. The other thing that people don't think about is, do you actually need to back up an Azure server? So in many cases, you probably should. So obviously Azure is very reliable and it's not likely to go down very often. But do you maybe need a local copy of that backup in case it does go down? Or if someone deletes lots of things and you want to roll back to the day before, you need to be doing backups for that. So again, that's something you need to think about. And the other thing is, Azure and any cloud servers aren't suitable for everything. So you can't just assume that you can dump your old custom database up on Azure and it will work perfectly. So this is something that you need to sort of speak to a provider, or ideally speak to your database provider about whether it is suitable to be putting on the cloud. So some old SQL databases, or if you need terminal services for some reason, things work differently in the cloud. So don't assume that you can just dump whatever you've got up there exactly as it is. But one of the good things is it does integrate with Office 365 and Dynamics if you're using CRM or for finance, Navision. So it means one username and password if you're using those platforms. So have a think about it, but again, not for everyone, but we're definitely, a lot of our clients have already jumped on board and are using the credits for example, one of them has a domain controller and a file server archive up on the cloud with VPNs and backups. And that's all they use it for. They use Office 365 for their emails and SharePoint for their documents and Salesforce for their CRM. But they've got a domain controller and Active Directory and central management of PCs, those sort of things, done via an Azure server, which in their case probably costs about $5,000 for the year. So again, they're sort of breaking even in that scenario. All right. So just quickly, we've got about 10 minutes to go. Which device is suitable for what staff? So again, when you're moving to the cloud and when people are starting to get a lot more mobile, the old sort of desktop model, which a lot of not-for-profits have been using, needs to be thought about, and potentially new devices. So typically we categorize things in three categories for sort of working devices, not necessarily phones. So the desktop, which is the old model, Dell or HP, Windows 10, last 5 years, maybe costs up to $1,000, and it's good for office-based staff. So again, when we recommend hardware devices, it's all about who's using it and what's the purpose. So don't assume that all of your staff need laptops or all of your staff need desktops. I would create a use case to say, look, if someone's sitting in the office 9 to 5, then desktops are actually probably the best option. Laptops, if you're mobile, if you're a manager, if all you're doing is word processing and you're quite portable, like myself, I live off my laptop, then you know that suits them. So all of the brands that you've probably heard of, Dell, HP, Lenovo, those sort of things, $600 to $2,000. So it's a bit more expensive typically for a good one than a desktop, but often, you know, that there can be value in that, particularly for your management. And now there's a whole sort of new category over the last few years, which is more what we're calling the tablet. So I'm sure all of you would have heard of iPad or the Samsung Galaxies, or Surface Pros are actually becoming very popular now. So again, you can have different operating systems. So Surface Pro is Windows, so similar Windows 10, similar to what you used to in many cases, whereas iPad is similar to your iPhone. So what we're finding, these tablets don't last as long, so maybe three years if you're lucky, 1 year, and often the warranties are only 1 year. And they're really great for like client visits and things like that. So you can take notes directly on them, you can handwrite on them, you can touch and show people, and they're very portable. So a lot of our staff, you know, put them in their handbags or you know, be able to carry one around at all times, basically. But the costs vary. So Surface Pros are at the higher end, more like $2,500. You can get cheap Android tablets for maybe $350, and iPads are more like you know, up to $1,000 usually. So you would need to look at each scenario and which one was suitable. So when you're looking at mobile devices, really all the prices change depending on what features you want. So do you need 4G? So if you're going in remote areas, that without Wi-Fi and you want to be able to access your client information, you probably need a 4G SIM card that you can plug into your iPad, which means you need an iPad that allows you to have a 4G. And again, they're a bit more expensive than the Wi-Fi only ones. Do you want to have Windows, which is the same as their desktops, or are you happy for them to use Android or iOS, the Apple system? Do you need to manage these centrally? So what happens if you lose an iPad? What about all the client data that's on there? Are you managing that? Support and training. So if someone breaks an iPad or doesn't know how to use it, have you got someone that can help them? Are your applications mobile friendly? So before you go off and buy a fleet of iPads, make sure you can actually access your application on a web browser or through your iPad in some way. So a lot of them still aren't mobile friendly. What accessories do you need? We find this as a killer. I know often when we buy a Surface Pro, we also spend about $500 on accessories in addition to the base cost for keyboards and Ethernet adapters and styluses and all those sort of things. So just remember that when you're doing your budgeting. Is it a personal device or a company device? So are you going to let people access your email and your client information on their phones, or are you going to provide the device? And what are your policies around staff usage? All right, just moving on quickly, I'm conscious of time, is the internet connectivity. So as I said, in some scenarios you actually need to upgrade your internet. And so there's lots of different types of internet. So really what we're saying is for most organisations, a lot of you are on ADSL still, which is sort of like a home-based connection with not much of an upload speed. So really from a business-grade internet, you're looking at like an Ethernet type connection, where it means you get the same amount upload as you do download. So when you're saving documents to the cloud, you want good upload speeds as well as download. So that's where you need, let's say, 20 meg up and 20 meg down. Fiber, obviously, you often tend to get more like 100. So again, each one's more expensive. NBN, look, it's not going to solve everyone's problems, and there are different types of NBN. So don't assume that NBN is going to be the fastest connection you know of, because some providers will sell you a low-grade NBN that they've capped. So you need to be conscious of that and know what you're signing up for. So again, a few scenarios. Look, if you're looking at, typically we say over 30 staff in one office, we tend to say that you need more symmetrical 10 or 20 meg connection if you're wanting to use things like video conferencing or cloud-based client management systems and those sort of things. So we've got a lot of clients with 10 people that can get away with ADSL, and that's fine. But again, just don't expect a great experience when you've got 10 people video conferencing at the same time. All right, so I might just move on quickly. You'll all get these slides if you want to dig a bit deeper. So really, in general, it's about designing your solution. So really, it's more like, look at what your organisation is going to be like in 5 years and how your staff are going to work, and base your design on that. So don't go off and buy a server if in 1 or 2 years' time you're going to be significantly different and not need a server. Because again, infrastructure is typically a 5-year investment. Determine your requirements for applications. So often you're using a database, but maybe if you actually looked at really what you needed, there is often things that are more suitable on cloud-based applications or other applications. So always start with your requirements and then look at what's available. Know how your staff need to work. Do they actually need to work at home or on devices, or are they very office-based and can work on desktops with servers, and that's fine. As I mentioned before, stage the transition and just do what adds value, and you can also gradually stage it so that your staff get accustomed to it. And in most cases, what we're saying is a hybrid model can work quite well where you've got a combination of both, particularly in the short term. And maybe in 5 years, then you get rid of your server when it dies. And lastly, in many cases, some of these decisions are technical and complicated, so it is best to get advice but that could be a board member or a support provider. All right, I'll open up for questions. Holly?
Thank you, Matt. Still no questions at the moment, so I don't know if you want to give people a bit of time to write a question, if they've got one, by summing up.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, sure. Look, basically, if happy to be available offline as well, as Ollie said at the start. If people just want to have a think about it, let things absorb, see the slides once Ollie sends them out, happy for you to email me, mwalton@infoxchange.org. But obviously it's probably a conversation that you should be having with your support provider, with your board, with your management team. It shouldn't be something that individuals should try and solve on their own. Even IT people should really be consulting the business to say, hey, what are our requirements for client management systems in 3 to 5 years? So having a look at that more strategic approach. So in general, look, obviously the cloud is going to be a great thing, and it is suitable for most organizations, even if it's just bits and pieces. So again, don't feel you need to jump in head first and do everything. Happy to recommend just a staged approach. All right, any questions?
Yes, we do. Can you have hybrid Office 365 module?
Not sure what they mean by module, but you can, if you've got an Exchange server, you can have Office 365 that works side by side with Exchange. So yes, I think is the answer to that question. I think usually the question is why do you need a hybrid? And the benefit of the hybrid in Exchange Office 365 is that you can gradually move people across. So you could move, 50 staff over in the first couple of months, but you could have 50 staff stay over and do it gradually. Or we usually recommend a pilot group where you have 5 people move over and test it from an email perspective as well.
All right, that was the only question. So would you like to add anything, Matt, before we close this webinar?
No, that's fine. Look, as I said, feel free to contact me if you need any more details, and we can go from there. But good luck with it all. I would consider you, encourage you to at least consider it and try and have a balanced and staged approach. So good luck with it.
Thank you very much, Matt, for another great presentation, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Just to remind you, the recording of this session and the slides will be uploaded shortly on our website, and the link will be sent to you. If you have any questions that come to your mind later on, or any feedback, as Matt said, please send that through or directly to Matt using the email address that's on your screen. Or you can send them through to me at events@connectinghub.org, and I'll transmit them to Matt. Again, thank you for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your day, and see you next time.